Welcome to my channel, a list that brings your story about the love of a mafia boss. Now let's listen.
The chill of October slipped through my threadbare cardigan as I hurried Liam toward the hospital entrance. My son's small hand clutched mine, his Batman backpack bobbing against his narrow shoulders with each step. The antiseptic smell hit us as the automatic doors slid open, a familiar punch to the senses that never got easier after 3 months of weekly visits. "Mommy, can we get hot chocolate after?" Liam asked, his 5-year-old voice carrying through the quiet lobby. A few heads turned our way, and I instinctively hunched my shoulders. "If you're good during my appointment," I promised, squeezing his hand. "Remember the rules? Sit quiet, draw pictures, don't bother the grown-ups," he recited, dragging his sneakers across the polished floor. The right one had a hole forming at the toe, another expense I couldn't afford. We checked in at the oncology department, the receptionist offering Liam a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. Everyone here knew our story: single mother, stage 2 breast cancer, no family support. The staff had become used to seeing Liam beside me during treatments when my usual babysitter, Mrs. Patel from next door, had her arthritis flare up. Today was one of those days. "Emma Sullivan?" A nurse called my name, and I gathered our things, herding Liam toward the treatment room. "The doctor wants to discuss your latest results first," she said quietly, leading us to a consultation room instead. My stomach clenched. Changes in routine were never good news. The small room had 2 cushioned chairs facing a desk. I settled Liam with his coloring book and crayons on one chair while I took the other. "Color me something pretty," I whispered, kissing the top of his head. His dark curls needed a trim, but haircuts were another luxury that would have to wait. Dr. Martin entered moments later, his face unreadable as he slid into his chair. He opened my file and adjusted his glasses. "Emma, there's been a development with your insurance coverage," he began, and my heart sank. "Not insurance. Anything but insurance problems. The experimental treatment protocol we discussed. Your coverage has been denied. They're claiming it's still too experimental." The room seemed to tilt sideways. "But you said this was my best chance," I whispered, conscious of Liam beside me, his crayon scratching steadily across paper. "It is," Dr. Martin agreed, removing his glasses to rub his eyes. "We're going to appeal, of course, but these things take time, and with the aggression of your particular case—" "Time I don't have," I finished for him. The words hung between us like a death sentence. He leaned forward, voice lowered. "There are other options we can discuss. Standard treatments that you already told me have a 30% lower success rate for my type of cancer." I cut in, fighting to keep my voice steady. "I have a 5-year-old, Dr. Martin. I need the best chance." "Mommy, I need the bathroom," Liam interrupted, tugging at my sleeve. I forced a smile. "Can we take a quick break?" Dr. Martin nodded, his expression sympathetic in a way that made me want to scream. I didn't need sympathy. I needed a miracle. I led Liam down the hallway to the restrooms, my mind racing. The experimental treatment would cost nearly $200,000 without insurance. I had maybe $3,000 in savings, most of which was already earmarked for next month's rent and utilities. I'd been picking up extra shifts at the diner whenever I had energy after treatments, but tips had been thin, and my manager was already making noises about my unreliable schedule. "Can you go by yourself, buddy? I'll wait right here," I asked, stopping outside the men's room. Liam nodded solemnly. "I'm a big boy." "The biggest," I agreed, watching as he disappeared through the door. I leaned against the wall, closing my eyes against the fluorescent lights that seemed to highlight every worry line on my face. At 32, I often caught sight of my reflection and wondered who the haggard woman staring back was. Cancer had hollowed my cheeks and dulled my once bright auburn hair. Dark circles permanently resided under my eyes, no matter how much sleep I managed to steal. A commotion down the hall drew my attention. A group of men in expensive suits strode through the oncology ward, surrounding a central figure like planets orbiting a sun. Nurses and doctors stepped aside, some appearing nervous, others clearly annoyed at the disruption. I watched, curious, despite my exhaustion. The central figure was tall and broad-shouldered, wearing a charcoal suit that probably cost more than my yearly rent. Even from a distance, I could sense an aura of authority radiating from him. His dark hair was impeccably styled, with silver threads at the temples that caught the light. He moved with purpose, barely acknowledging the staff as they directed him toward the private wing. One of his entourage, a younger man with a severe crew cut, noticed me watching and narrowed his eyes. I quickly looked away, suddenly conscious of my worn jeans and the coffee stain on my sweater. The bathroom door swung open and Liam emerged, wiping damp hands on his pants. "Did you wash with soap?" I asked automatically. "Yes, Mom," he sighed, the universal tone of a child tired of the same questions. As we turned to head back to Dr. Martin's office, Liam suddenly froze, his gaze fixed on the group of men now standing near the nurse's station. The well-dressed man at the center was signing something, while his associates maintained a protective circle around him. "Mommy," Liam said, voice rising with excitement. "That's him. That's the man from your stories." My blood ran cold. "What man, Liam?" I asked quietly, trying to pull him along, but Liam had already slipped from my grasp, darting toward the group with the fearless abandon only children possess. "Liam!" I hissed, hurrying after him. But it was too late. He had already reached the edge of the group, tilting his head back to stare up at the imposing man. One of the guards moved to intercept him, but Liam ducked under his arm with the agility of youth. "You're from Mommy's stories," Liam announced loudly, pointing a small finger up at the man. "You're Mr. Dominic, the man who fights bad guys." The entire group went silent. The man, Dominic, turned slowly, dark eyes finding my son. His gaze shifted, tracking past Liam to where I stood, frozen in horror. The color drained from his face as our eyes met. Recognition flickered in his expression, followed by something I couldn't name. Shock, perhaps, or disbelief. The pen he'd been holding slipped from his fingers, clattering against the countertop. "I'm sorry," I gasped, finally reaching Liam and grabbing his hand. "I'm so sorry. He has an active imagination." Dominic stared at me as though seeing a ghost. "Emma," he said, my name falling from his lips like a forgotten prayer. My heart stuttered. How did this stranger know my name? One of his men stepped forward, hand moving suggestively toward his jacket, but Dominic held up a hand, stopping him. "It's all right," he said, his voice deep and controlled despite the pallor of his face. "The boy is mistaken." His eyes never left mine, searching for something I couldn't understand. I pulled Liam closer to me. "I'm sorry for the interruption," I repeated, desperate to escape the intensity of his gaze. "We'll just go." "Wait," Dominic commanded, and though his tone was soft, it carried unmistakable authority. "Your son," his eyes dropped to Liam, studying his features with unnerving intensity. "How old is he?" The question sent alarm bells ringing through my head. I took a step back, clutching Liam protectively. "That's really none of your business," I said, finding my voice despite the fear climbing up my throat. "Come on, Liam." Dominic's expression hardened. "5," he said, not a question but a statement. "He's 5 years old." I felt the blood drain from my face. How could he know that? "Mr. Romano," a nurse interrupted nervously. "Your wife is waiting." "Wife?" The word hit me like a slap. This man, this stranger who somehow knew me, had a wife waiting for him in the private wing. Of course he did. Men like him always had everything. "Take care of it," Dominic said to one of his men without looking away from me. "I have something more important to attend to." The younger man with the crew cut looked between us, his expression guarded. "Sir, Mrs. Romano." "I said take care of it, Vince," Dominic snapped, the first crack in his composed facade. I seized the distraction to turn away, tugging Liam back toward Dr. Martin's office. My heart pounded so hard I could feel it in my fingertips, a dizzying rush of adrenaline and confusion. "Mommy, why are we leaving? That was him! From your stories!" Liam protested, dragging his feet. "Liam, please," I begged, not daring to look back. I never told you stories about anyone named Dominic." "Yes, you did. He's the king who lost his queen, remember? You said he had sad eyes just like him." My stomach dropped. I had told Liam that story, a fairy tale I'd invented on a night when he'd asked about his father, a king who'd lost his queen to a terrible curse, who searched the kingdom for her. It was just a bedtime story, crafted from my own loneliness and regret. I'd never named the king Dominic. "Ms. Sullivan," a deep voice called from behind us. "Please, a moment." I stopped, though every instinct screamed at me to keep walking. Slowly, I turned to face Dominic Romano. Up close, he was even more intimidating. Over 6 feet tall, with features that might have been carved from stone. But his eyes... Liam was right. They were sad. Haunted even as they moved between my face and my son's. "I believe we have matters to discuss," he said quietly. "Privately." One of his men stepped forward, handing him a business card which he offered to me. I hesitated before taking it, careful not to let our fingers touch. Dominic Romano, Romano Enterprises, it read in elegant embossing, followed by a phone number. "I don't know what you think," I began, but he cut me off with a subtle shake of his head. "Not here," he murmured, eyes flicking meaningfully to Liam. "Call that number tonight. It's my private line." His gaze returned to Liam, softening almost imperceptibly. "He has your eyes." Before I could respond, a commotion erupted at the end of the hall. A woman's voice, sharp with irritation, cut through the quiet of the oncology ward. "Dominic! I've been waiting for 20 minutes. Dominic's jaw tightened, but he didn't look away from me. "Tonight," he repeated, his voice low and urgent. "Please." Then he was gone, striding back toward his entourage, his tall frame swallowed by the group as they moved to intercept the approaching woman. I stood rooted to the spot, the business card burning between my fingers. "Mommy?" Liam tugged at my hand. Why did the king look scared? I slipped the card into my pocket, my mind spinning. "He's not a king, baby. He's just a man who was confused." But as I led Liam back to Dr. Martin's office, a memory surfaced, hazy and distorted by time. A summer night 6 years ago, a charity gala where I'd been working as a waitress. Dark eyes following me across a crowded room. A name whispered against my skin in the shadows of a garden terrace. Dominic. It couldn't be the same man. That night had been a dream, a moment of madness I'd locked away and tried to forget. The night that had given me Liam, my blessing, my salvation, my entire world. Dr. Martin was still waiting, my file open before him. He looked up as we entered, his expression concerned. "Everything all right? You were gone a while." "Fine," I lied, settling back into the chair. "Just ran into someone." As the doctor resumed discussing alternative treatment options, I half listened, my thoughts elsewhere. The card in my pocket seemed to weigh 1,000 pounds. Whatever Dominic Romano wanted to discuss, I was certain of one thing. It would change everything. And with my life already hanging by a thread, I wasn't sure if I could survive another upheaval. As we left the hospital an hour later, I felt eyes on us. Scanning the parking lot, I caught sight of a black SUV with tinted windows idling near the exit. As Liam and I passed, the engine started. They were following us, watching us. The king had found his lost queen, and he wasn't letting her disappear again. The diner where I worked was nearly empty when Liam and I arrived. The afternoon lull between lunch and dinner meant only a few regulars occupied the booths, Mr. Grayson nursing his endless coffee, and the Simmons brothers arguing over their usual chess game. "Emma," Darlene called from behind the counter, her lined face breaking into a smile that quickly faded when she saw my expression. "What happened, honey? Bad news at the doctor's?" I nodded, guiding Liam to his usual spot at the far end of the counter where he could color without disturbing customers. "Insurance denied the experimental treatment," I said quietly, grabbing an apron from under the counter. "You're not working today," Darlene protested, her hands on her hips. "You just had chemo yesterday." "I need the hours," I said simply, tying the apron around my waist. The weight of Dominic Romano's business card still pressed against my thigh in my pocket, a constant reminder of the impossible decision before me. Call the stranger who somehow knew me, who looked at my son with such knowing eyes, or pretend the encounter had never happened. Darlene sighed, knowing better than to argue. "Fine. But you're taking home leftovers tonight. That boy of yours is getting too skinny. I smiled gratefully, brushing Liam's curls back from his forehead. Hot chocolate? I asked him, and his face lit up. With whipped cream? Just this once, I conceded, though we both knew it was our ritual, not an exception. As I prepared his drink, my hands trembled slightly. The hospital encounter had shaken me more than I wanted to admit. Romano. The name tickled something in my memory. Something I'd heard long after that summer night. Something that made my stomach clench with unease. I served a few customers, grateful for the mindless routine of taking orders and refilling coffee cups. It kept my thoughts from spiraling, at least momentarily. The afternoon sun slanted through the windows, catching the dust motes floating in the air, turning them golden. On days like this, if I squinted just right, I could almost pretend everything was normal. That I wasn't dying, that I wasn't alone. The bell above the door jangled, and I turned. Order pad ready. My greeting died on my lips. Vince, Dominic's crew-cut enforcer from the hospital, stood in the entryway, surveying the diner with cold, calculating eyes. When his gaze landed on me, something like satisfaction crossed his features. My heart hammered against my ribs as he slid into a booth in my section. Not coincidence. He'd tracked us here somehow. "Mommy," Liam whispered loudly, tugging at my apron. "That's the man who works for the king." "Shh." I hushed him, pasting on a server's smile as I approached the booth. "Welcome to Sal's Diner. What can I get for you?" Vince looked up at me, his eyes assessing. "Just coffee." He paused, then added, "For now." I nodded and turned to fetch the coffee pot, feeling his eyes on my back like laser points. "Emma," Darlene hissed as I passed her. "You know that guy?" I shook my head. "Not really." "Well, he looks like trouble," she muttered. "And not the good kind." I poured Vince's coffee with a steady hand, determined not to show fear. "Anything else?" I asked, setting the cup down. "Mr. Romano would like to speak with you," he said, his voice low enough that only I could hear. "He sent me to ensure you received his message." "I got the card," I replied, matching his volume. "I haven't decided if I'm calling." Vince's expression hardened. "This isn't a request that you can decline, Ms. Sullivan." A chill ran down my spine. "Are you threatening me?" "I'm advising you," he corrected, taking a sip of his coffee. "Mr. Romano is not a patient man, but he's making an exception in your case." His eyes drifted to where Liam sat coloring. For obvious reasons, my protective instincts flared. "Leave my son out of this," I hissed. "Whatever Dominic Romano thinks he knows. He knows exactly who that boy is." Vince cut in, his voice deadly quiet. "And so do you." The order pad slipped from my suddenly numb fingers. I bent to retrieve it, using the moment to compose myself. "I'll call him tonight," I conceded, straightening. Vince nodded once, satisfied. He pulled out his wallet and placed a $100 bill on the table. "For the coffee," he said, sliding out of the booth. "And a piece of advice. Don't try to run. He'll find you." As he passed Liam, he paused, studying my son's dark curls and olive complexion. Features that had never matched my own fair coloring. Features I'd attributed to a nameless, faceless man I'd spent one reckless night with. "Cute kid," Vince said, loud enough for the entire diner to hear. "He looks just like his father." Then he was gone, the bell jangling in his wake. I stood frozen, the $100 bill mocking me from the table. Part of me wanted to chase after him and throw it in his face. The pragmatic part, the part that counted pennies and worried about next month's rent, made me slip it into my apron pocket instead. "Friend of yours?" Darlene asked, eyebrows raised as she approached. "Hardly," I muttered. "Just some guy. Some guy who left $100 for a cup of coffee," she observed skeptically. "Emma, honey, you know you can tell me if you're in trouble." I forced a smile. "It's nothing I can't handle." But as the afternoon wore on, a steady parade of dark SUVs drove slowly past the diner. Sometimes they parked across the street, sometimes they just cruised by. Always with tinted windows, always watching. By the time my shift ended at 6, my nerves were frayed to breaking point. I collected Liam, who had fallen asleep on his coloring books, and bundled him into his jacket. "Want me to walk you home?" Darlene offered, eyeing the black SUV that had been parked outside for the last hour. "We'll be fine," I assured her, though I wasn't certain that was true. "It's only 3 blocks. Those 3 blocks felt like miles as I carried my sleeping son, his head heavy on my shoulder. The October chill had deepened with nightfall, and I pulled Liam's jacket tighter around him. The SUV crawled along behind us, maintaining a distance that was neither threatening nor comforting. Our apartment building was a shabby 4-story walk-up with unreliable heat and a perpetually broken elevator. Tonight, the dim lobby light flickered ominously as I fumbled with my keys, Liam's weight making my arms tremble with fatigue. "Let me," a deep voice offered from behind me. I whirled around, nearly losing my balance. Dominic Romano stood in the doorway, his imposing frame silhouetted against the streetlights. Without his entourage, dressed in a simple black coat over his suit, he looked almost normal. Almost. Except for the aura of power that seemed to radiate from him. "How did you find my apartment?" I demanded, clutching Liam tighter. "You should ask instead why it took me so long," he replied, stepping forward to take my keys gently from my hand. His fingers brushed mine, sending an unwelcome jolt through my system. Part memory, part something I refused to name. He unlocked the door with ease, holding it open for me. I hesitated, trapped between my exhaustion and my instinct to flee. "I'm not here to hurt you, Emma," he said softly, as though reading my thoughts. "Or Liam." The sound of my son's name on his lips made everything suddenly, terrifyingly real. I stepped through the door, and Dominic followed, closing it behind us. The lobby was empty, the mailboxes lining one wall covered in graffiti and dents. The elevator stood open, its out-of-order sign hanging crookedly. "4th floor," I said unnecessarily, starting toward the stairs. "Let me carry him," Dominic offered, reaching for Liam. I stepped back instinctively. "I've got him." Something like hurt flickered across his face before his expression smoothed back to neutrality. "As you wish." The climb was excruciating. My legs, already weak from chemotherapy and a full shift at the diner, protested with each step. By the 2nd floor, my breathing was labored. By the 3rd, my vision had started to blur at the edges. I felt Liam's weight suddenly lighten as Dominic carefully lifted him from my arms. Too exhausted to protest, I let him take my son, watching as he cradled Liam with surprising gentleness. "Which apartment?" he asked when we reached the 4th floor. "4C, I managed, leaning against the wall for support. He waited as I unlocked the door, then carried Liam inside. Our apartment was small, a single bedroom that Liam and I shared, a living area that doubled as a kitchen, and a bathroom barely big enough to turn around in. I'd done my best with secondhand furniture and bright thrift store finds, but there was no disguising the water stains on the ceiling, or the draft from the windows that never quite closed properly. Dominic took it all in with an unreadable expression. "Bedroom?" he asked quietly. I pointed, and he disappeared down the short hallway. I slumped onto our worn couch, gathering my strength. When Dominic returned, his face was grim. "He didn't wake up," he reported, settling into the armchair across from me. It creaked ominously under his weight. We sat in tense silence, studying each other. In the harsh light of my apartment, I could see the fine lines around his eyes, the silver in his dark hair more pronounced than it had appeared at the hospital. He was older than I remembered, mid-40s perhaps, but his physique suggested a man who had never allowed himself to soften with age or success. "Why are you here?" I finally asked, too tired for pleasantries. "You know why," he replied, his dark eyes never leaving my face. "He's mine, isn't he?" The question hung in the air between us, heavy with implications. I could deny it, but what would be the point? Liam's resemblance to the man sitting across from me was undeniable, now that they were in the same room, the same olive skin, the same determined set of the jaw, even the same tiny dimple in the right cheek when they smiled. "Yes," I admitted, the word barely audible. Dominic closed his eyes briefly, as though absorbing a physical blow. When he opened them again, they burned with intensity. "Why didn't you tell me?" The question ignited a spark of anger in my chest. "Tell you? I didn't even know your last name. You disappeared before morning, remember? No note, no number. Nothing." I left my card on the nightstand, he countered, frowning. There was no card, I said firmly. I looked. His expression shifted, realization dawning. Teresa, he muttered, a muscle working in his jaw. She must have... Who's Teresa? I asked, though I had a sinking feeling I already knew. My wife. He said the word like it tasted bitter. Ex-wife now, though the divorce isn't finalized. The woman at the hospital, I guessed, remembering the sharp voice calling his name. He nodded, rubbing a hand over his face. It's complicated. It always is, I said tiredly. Look, what do you want from us? Money? I won't take it. The lie came easily, even as my mind screamed at me to reconsider. The experimental treatment, Liam's future, our survival. What I want, Dominic said slowly, is to know my son, and to understand why the mother of my child is living like this when I have the resources to provide everything she needs. I didn't know who you were, I reminded him. And even if I had, I trailed off, unsure how to express my complicated feelings about that night. It had been magical, yes, but also reckless. A fantasy that had no place in reality. Even if you had, he prompted, leaning forward. I met his gaze steadily. Would you really have wanted a cocktail waitress with no college degree and no prospects showing up claiming to be pregnant with your child? A man like you? I gestured vaguely at his expensive suit, his obvious wealth. You have a certain type of woman in your life. I'm not it. You know nothing about what type of woman I want in my life, he said, his voice dangerously soft. Before I could respond, a small voice called from the hallway. Mommy. We both turned to see Liam standing there in his Batman pajamas, rubbing his eyes sleepily. When he spotted Dominic, he froze, eyes widening. The king, he whispered, loud enough for both of us to hear. You came back. Dominic's expression transformed, softening in a way I wouldn't have believed possible if I hadn't seen it myself. Hello, Liam, he said gently. I'm not a king, though, just a man. Liam approached cautiously, studying Dominic with undisguised curiosity. You look like me, he declared after a moment. Dominic's lips curved in a small smile. I was thinking the same thing about you. Liam, honey, it's late, I interjected, extending my hand to him. You should be in bed. But the king is here, Liam protested, even as he yawned widely. Mr. Romano, I corrected firmly. And he's leaving soon. Dominic rose from the chair, towering over both of us. I'll come back tomorrow, he said. Not a question, but a statement of fact. His eyes found mine over Liam's head. We have much to discuss. I nodded reluctantly. What choice did I have? Can I say goodnight to him? Dominic asked, surprising me with the request. After a moment's hesitation, I nodded again. 5 minutes, I conceded, moving to the kitchen to give them some privacy while still keeping them in my line of sight. Dominic knelt before Liam, bringing himself to eye level with my son. They spoke quietly, too low for me to hear, but I watched as Liam's face brightened, then grew serious. At one point, he nodded solemnly, as though accepting an important mission. Finally, Dominic stood, ruffling Liam's hair with a gentleness that seemed at odds with his powerful presence. Good night, buddy, he said, his voice carrying across the small apartment. I'll see you tomorrow. Promise? Liam asked, and something in his hopeful tone broke my heart. How many times had he asked about his father? How many bedtime stories had I invented to fill the void? I promise, Dominic replied, his expression grave. A Romano always keeps his word. As I tucked Liam back into bed moments later, he looked up at me with wide, excited eyes. Mommy, is he really my daddy? The question I'd dreaded for years. We'll talk about it tomorrow, I hedged, smoothing his covers. Sleep now. He said he's going to take us to his castle, Liam murmured, already drifting off. He said we'll never be cold again. I froze, a chill running down my spine. What exactly had Dominic promised my son in those few minutes? When I returned to the living room, Dominic was standing by the window, looking out at the city lights. He turned as I approached. He's extraordinary, he said simply. Yes, he is, I agreed, crossing my arms protectively over my chest. Why didn't you try to find me? He asked, returning to the question that seemed to be eating at him. After you discovered you were pregnant. I sank back onto the couch, suddenly aware of how the chemo had drained me. I tried, I admitted. I went back to the hotel, asked about the charity gala. They wouldn't give me any information about the attendees. I didn't even know your full name, just Dominic. I shrugged. After a while, it didn't matter anymore. I had Liam. He was enough. Dominic studied me, his expression unreadable. And now? Is he still enough to keep you from accepting help when you clearly need it? My defenses rose. We're managing. Are you? He challenged, gesturing around the apartment. This place is falling apart. You're working as a waitress while undergoing cancer treatment. Your son is wearing clothes that are too small for him. This isn't managing, Emma. This is barely surviving. The truth of his words stung. What do you suggest? I asked. Too exhausted to maintain my pride. That I let you waltz in after 5 years and take over our lives? That I accept your charity? Not charity, he corrected sharply. Responsibility. He's my son too, Emma. I have a right to provide for him, for both of you. And what does that look like exactly? I pressed. Weekly child support checks? Occasional visits when your schedule permits? Or are you planning to sue for custody now that you know he exists? Fear gripped me at the thought. Dominic Romano was clearly wealthy and powerful. If he wanted to take Liam from me, could I even fight him? Especially now, with my health so uncertain. I'm not going to take him from you, Dominic said, as though reading my thoughts. But I want to be part of his life, and I want to help you fight this cancer. His eyes bore into mine. I know about the experimental treatment, Emma. I can make it happen. My breath caught. How did you... I made some calls after I saw you at the hospital, he explained. I have connections in the medical field. The treatment you need costs $197,000. I can have the money transferred to the hospital tomorrow morning. The sum, so precise, so impossible, hung in the air between us. The exact amount that stood between me and a fighting chance. Why would you do that? I whispered, tears threatening for the first time since his appearance. Dominic moved closer, his expression softening. Because Liam needs his mother, he said simply. And because I've spent 5 years searching for something I couldn't name. Now I know what it was. His voice dropped lower. It was you, Emma. It was always you. His words hung in the air between us, impossible and dreamlike. I'd been surviving on my own for so long that the idea of someone swooping in to rescue me felt like a fairy tale, beautiful but dangerously unreal. You don't even know me, I said finally, breaking the charged silence. One night 6 years ago doesn't make us anything to each other. Then let me know you, Dominic countered, his eyes never leaving mine. Let me help you, Emma. Not just for Liam's sake, but for yours. I stood shakily, needing distance between us. The intensity of his gaze made it hard to think clearly. I need time to process this, I said, moving toward the door. It's late and I'm exhausted. Dominic nodded, reaching into his jacket to withdraw a sleek phone. Take my number, he said, handing it to me. Call anytime, day or night. I accepted it numbly, watching as he programmed his contact information into my ancient flip phone. When he handed it back, our fingers brushed again, and that same electric current raced up my arm. I'll have the money transferred to the hospital tomorrow, he continued, moving toward the door. No strings attached, Emma, whether you decide to let me into your lives or not. That treatment is yours. The generosity stunned me. I don't know what to say. Say you'll think about it, he replied, his hand on the doorknob. About us. About what we could be to each other. Before I could respond, he was gone, the door closing softly behind him. I sank back onto the couch, my mind reeling. The man who had haunted my dreams for years, the nameless, faceless father of my child, was suddenly, overwhelmingly real, and he wanted to be part of our lives. Sleep eluded me that night. I tossed restlessly beside Liam, listening to his soft breathing, watching the moonlight create patterns on the ceiling. By morning, I had made no decisions, but exhaustion had given way to a strange, floating sense of possibility. Dr. Martin called before I'd even finished my first cup of coffee. Emma, he said, his voice tense with excitement. Something extraordinary has happened. An anonymous donor has covered the full cost of your experimental treatment. My hand tightened on the phone. Anonymous? Completely. The hospital received a wire transfer this morning with explicit instructions that the funds be applied to your treatment protocol. Emma, this is unprecedented. Dominic had kept his word. No strings attached, just as he'd promised. When can we start? I asked, watching Liam pour cereal at the kitchen table, blissfully unaware of the miracle unfolding around him. Today, Dr. Martin replied. Can you come in at noon? After hanging up, I sat frozen, my coffee growing cold. Dominic Romano had just saved my life. The question now was, at what cost? The answer came just after 10, with a knock on my apartment door. I opened it to find Vince standing in the hallway, his expression professional, but slightly less cold than the previous day. Ms. Sullivan, he greeted me with a nod. Mr. Romano sent me to drive you to your appointment. How did he know about my appointment? I asked, though I wasn't truly surprised. Vince's lips twitched. Mr. Romano makes it his business to know everything that concerns his family. Family. The word sent a shiver through me. I can take the bus, I protested weakly. Mr. Romano insists, Vince replied, in a tone that suggested further argument was futile, for both your safety and convenience. I hesitated, looking back at Liam, who was watching cartoons in his pajamas. I need to find someone to watch him. Already arranged, Vince said. Mrs. Patel from next door will be here in 30 minutes. Mr. Romano spoke with her this morning. My jaw clenched at his presumption. Of course he did. Nevertheless, at noon, I found myself in the back of a luxurious black SUV, being driven to the hospital by Dominic's silent enforcer. The vehicle's plush leather seats and climate-controlled interior made me acutely aware of my worn jeans and secondhand sweater. He's waiting for you, Vince said as we pulled up to the hospital entrance. 3rd floor, private wing, room 312. I stepped out, drawing curious glances from hospital staff who clearly recognized the vehicle. Thank you for the ride, I said stiffly. Vince nodded. I'll be here when you're finished. The private wing of the hospital was a different world from the oncology department I was used to. Soft lighting, tasteful artwork, and hushed voices created an atmosphere more like a luxury hotel than a medical facility. A nurse guided me to room 312, where Dominic stood speaking quietly with a distinguished-looking doctor. Both men turned as I entered. Dominic's face brightened, his eyes warming at the sight of me. Emma, he said, striding forward to take my hand. Dr. Keller has agreed to oversee your treatment personally. He's the leading expert in this protocol. The doctor extended his hand with a kind smile. Ms. Sullivan, it's a pleasure to meet you. We've reviewed your case extensively, and I believe you're an excellent candidate for this treatment. I shook his hand, overwhelmed by the speed at which events were unfolding. Thank you, I managed, my eyes drifting back to Dominic. He looked different today, still imposing in a charcoal suit that probably cost more than my yearly rent, but less intimidating somehow. The harsh edges I'd glimpsed yesterday had softened in the daylight. I'll leave you to discuss the details, Dominic said, squeezing my hand briefly before releasing it. I have some business to attend to, but Vince will drive you home afterward. You don't need to stay? I asked, surprised by his departure. A shadow crossed his face. I thought my presence might complicate things for you. This is about your health, Emma. Not about us. The consideration touched me more than I wanted to admit. Thank you, I said softly, for everything. His eyes held mine for a long moment, communicating something deeper than words could express. Then he was gone, leaving me with Dr. Keller and a treatment plan that might just save my life. The next few hours passed in a blur of consultations, blood draws, and detailed explanations of the treatment protocol. By the time I emerged from the hospital, the October sun was setting, casting long shadows across the parking lot. Vince stood beside the SUV, opening the door as I approached. Successful day? He asked, the closest he'd come to casual conversation. I nodded, sliding into the back seat. Very. Good, he replied, closing the door and circling to the driver's side. Mr. Romano has requested that I take you to his residence. He'd like to speak with you. Alarm prickled along my spine. I need to get home to Liam. Your son is already there, Vince informed me, starting the engine. Mr. Romano picked him up from your neighbor's apartment himself. They're waiting for you. My heartbeat quickened. You had no right to, Ms. Sullivan, Vince interrupted calmly. Mr. Romano is Liam's father. He has every right. He met my eyes in the rearview mirror. And Mrs. Patel was more than happy to release Liam to him after he provided proper identification and called you for verbal confirmation. I began, then stopped. What do you mean, called me? Vince's expression remained impassive. Someone claiming to be you called Mrs. Patel while Mr. Romano was there, confirming that Liam could go with his father. Cold fear gripped me. That wasn't me. For the first time, Vince looked uncomfortable. I see. The implication hung in the air between us. Dominic Romano had manufactured my consent to take my son. The man who had promised to make no claims on Liam had just demonstrated exactly how easily he could take him if he wanted to. Take me to him, I said, my voice hard with fear and anger. Now. As the SUV glided through the streets of the city, leaving my familiar neighborhood behind for increasingly affluent areas, I struggled to contain my growing panic. Dominic Romano wasn't just a wealthy businessman with connections. He was something else entirely, something dangerous. The name finally clicked in my memory. Romano Enterprises. The whispered rumors among the waitstaff at the hotel. The mysterious businessman with ties to organized crime. The man whose name was never spoken directly, only alluded to with nervous glances and hushed tones. I had given my heart to a ghost for one night 6 years ago. Now that ghost had a name, a face, and my son. The SUV pulled through imposing iron gates that opened automatically at our approach. A winding driveway led to a sprawling mansion perched on a hillside overlooking the city. Floodlights illuminated a facade of stone and glass, modern and fortress-like in its grandeur. Welcome to Romano Estate, Vince said, as he parked in a circular driveway in front of massive double doors. I barely heard him, my attention fixed on the house. No, castle was more apt, where my son was being held. If anything has happened to him, I began, my voice trembling with barely contained rage. Ms. Sullivan, Vince interrupted, his tone surprisingly gentle. Mr. Romano would cut off his own hand before harming that boy. Whatever else you may think of him, believe that. Before I could respond, the front door swung open. Liam burst out, his face alight with excitement. Mommy, come see the pool and the game room. There's a whole movie theater downstairs. Relief flooded me as I scrambled from the car, kneeling to embrace him. Are you okay? I whispered, checking him over. I'm awesome, he exclaimed, bouncing on his toes. Daddy showed me everything. Daddy. The word struck me like a physical blow. One afternoon, and Dominic had already claimed that title in my son's heart. I looked up to see Dominic standing in the doorway, watching us with an unreadable expression. He'd changed from his business suit to dark jeans and a simple black sweater that somehow made him appear more approachable. Emma, he greeted me, his voice carefully neutral. Please come inside. I stood, keeping Liam close to my side as we approached the house. You had no right to take him without my permission, I said quietly, ensuring Liam couldn't hear. We need to talk, he replied, stepping aside to let us enter. Privately. The interior of the mansion matched its exterior, sleek, modern, and intimidating in its perfection. Soaring ceilings, marble floors, and tasteful artwork created an atmosphere of restrained luxury. It was beautiful, but cold, lacking the lived-in warmth of a true home. A middle-aged woman in a simple uniform approached us, her smile warm despite the formal setting. Mr. Romano, dinner is ready whenever you'd like to be served, she said with a slight accent I couldn't place. Thank you, Elena, Dominic replied. Liam, would you like to go with Elena to see what she's prepared for dessert? I need to speak with your mother for a few minutes. Liam looked up at me questioningly. Despite my anger, I nodded. It's okay, baby. I'll be right here. Once Liam had disappeared with Elena, Dominic gestured toward a doorway off the main hall. My study. We'll have privacy there. I followed him into a wood-paneled room lined with bookshelves. A massive desk dominated one end, while a sitting area with leather couches occupied the other. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered the same spectacular view of the city lights below. Dominic closed the door behind us, then moved to a sideboard where crystal decanters gleamed in the low lighting. Drink? He offered. Answers, I countered, standing rigidly in the center of the room. Starting with who you really are and why you faked my permission to take my son. He poured himself a measure of amber liquid, his back to me. I am exactly who I appear to be, he said, turning to face me. Dominic Romano, CEO of Romano Enterprises. A businessman with interest in real estate, shipping, and private security. And the other businesses? I pressed. The ones that require men like Vince? His expression hardened slightly. My family has a complicated history, one that I've worked hard to legitimize over the past decade. He took a careful sip of his drink. As for Liam, I apologize for the deception. When Mrs. Patel hesitated to release him to me, I made a judgment call. An incorrect one, it seems. A judgment call? I repeated incredulously. You impersonated me to take my child. Our child, he corrected, his voice hardening. And I brought him to my home, not to harm him, but to show him where he belongs. Where you both belong. I shook my head, backing away. You're delusional if you think one treatment payment gives you the right to... This isn't about the money, Dominic interrupted, setting his glass down with a sharp click. This is about family, about the 5 years I've lost with my son because you didn't try hard enough to find me. The accusation stung. I told you, I had no way to... You had ways, he cut in. You could have pressed harder at the hotel, contacted the charity organizers, asked around about who I was. His eyes flashed with barely controlled emotion. Instead, you gave up. You robbed me of 5 years of his life. Anger flared within me. And where were you during those 5 years? You said yourself you've been looking for something you couldn't name, if I meant anything to you after that night. Why didn't you try to find me? Dominic's expression shifted, the anger giving way to something more complex. I did, he said quietly. For months after that night, I had my people searching for Emma, with auburn hair, who worked the charity gala. But you'd already left the hotel's employment by then. The staff wouldn't give information about former employees. He ran a hand through his hair in a gesture that seemed strangely vulnerable. I nearly drove myself mad looking for you. The confession stunned me. Why? I whispered. It was one night that changed everything, he replied, moving closer. I've had wealth, power, beautiful women, but never connection. Never that feeling of rightness I experienced with you. His voice dropped lower. I knew it the moment I saw you across that ballroom. You were different, real, in a world of facades. I swallowed hard, fighting the pull of his words, the intensity of his gaze. So what now? You found us. You're paying for my treatment. What do you expect in return? I want us to be a family, he said simply. I want Liam to grow up knowing his father. I want you both here, safe, protected. As what? I challenged. Your kept woman? The mother of your illegitimate child? Hidden away in your castle? Dominic's expression darkened. Don't twist this, Emma. I'm not offering you a position as my mistress. I'm offering you a home, security, a future for our son. And what about your wife? I asked. Ex-wife, whatever she is. Teresa and I have been separated for 3 years, he said dismissively. The divorce will be finalized next month. She's fighting for a larger settlement, which is why she showed up at the hospital. Our marriage was... He paused, searching for the right word. Political. Advantageous for both our families. There was never love between us. Unlike the great love you felt for me after one night, I couldn't keep the skepticism from my voice. His eyes locked with mine. I'm not claiming it was love, he said carefully. I'm saying it was significant. Important enough that I never forgot you. That finding you again feels like... He hesitated. Like finding a missing piece of myself. The sincerity in his voice shook me. This powerful, dangerous man was laying himself bare in a way I hadn't expected. It would be easier if he were just trying to buy me, to claim ownership of Liam. His vulnerability was far more difficult to resist. "I can't just move in here and play house with you," I said finally. "We're strangers, Dominic. Whatever connection we shared 6 years ago, we need to build something real now, for Liam's sake." Relief crossed his features. "So, you're willing to try?" Before I could answer, a soft knock interrupted us. Elena opened the door, Liam peering around her legs. "Sorry to disturb you, sir, but dinner is getting cold, and the young man is quite hungry," she said apologetically. Dominic's expression softened as he looked at our son. "We can't have that, can we? We'll continue this discussion later," he added to me. The dining room, like everything else in the mansion, was absurdly grand. A long table that could seat 20, crystal chandeliers, and silver place settings that probably cost more than my entire apartment. Elena had set 3 places at one end, making the vast space feel slightly more intimate. Liam climbed into his chair, his eyes wide as he took in the formal setting. "Do kings eat like this every day?" he whispered loudly to Dominic. A smile tugged at Dominic's lips. "Not kings, buddy. Just lucky people." As we ate, I watched the interaction between father and son with mixed emotions. Dominic was patient, attentive, genuinely interested in everything Liam had to say. For his part, Liam had already accepted this man as his father without question, the natural resilience of childhood allowing him to embrace the sudden change in his world. "After dinner, can we watch a movie in the big theater?" Liam asked, his face smeared with chocolate from the elaborate dessert Elena had prepared. I opened my mouth to refuse. We needed to get home, to return to our normal life, but Dominic spoke first. "It's getting late, buddy. How about tomorrow? You and your mom can stay in the guest house tonight, and we'll have all day tomorrow for movies." "We're not staying," I said firmly, wiping Liam's face with a napkin. "Mommy, please," Liam begged, his eyes wide and pleading. "Just one night in the castle?" Dominic's gaze met mine over our son's head. "The guest house is completely separate from the main house," he said quietly. "You'll have total privacy, and it would save you the drive back to your apartment tonight when you're clearly exhausted." He was right about my exhaustion. The treatment had taken more out of me than I wanted to admit, and the emotional roller coaster of the day had left me drained. The thought of returning to our cold apartment, with its drafty windows and unreliable heat, held little appeal. "One night," I conceded reluctantly, "but tomorrow we go home and figure this out properly." Dominic nodded, satisfaction gleaming in his eyes. One night is a start. The guest house, as Dominic had called it, was larger than my entire apartment building, a charming 2-story cottage nestled at the edge of the estate's manicured grounds. It featured a fully equipped kitchen, 3 bedrooms, and luxurious furnishings that made me afraid to touch anything. "Will this be suitable for tonight?" Dominic asked as he showed us through the space, Liam racing ahead to explore every room with delighted exclamations. "It's bigger than our whole neighborhood," I muttered, running my fingers over a marble countertop that probably cost more than I made in a year. A small smile played at his lips. "I'll take that as a yes." He reached into his pocket and withdrew a small velvet box. "For you. A phone to replace that ancient flip model. My number is programmed in it, along with Vince's and the house security team." I hesitated before accepting it. "I don't need—" "Please," he interrupted gently. "For my peace of mind, if nothing else, the treatment you started today will have side effects. I need to know you can reach me if you need anything." His concern seemed genuine, making it harder to maintain my defensive walls. I took the box with a nod of thanks, not opening it yet. "Elena has stocked the refrigerator and pantry," Dominic continued. "And there are clothes in the master bedroom that should fit you both. Nothing extravagant," he added quickly, seeing my expression. "Just basics for tonight and tomorrow." "Thank you," I said stiffly, uncomfortable with his generosity but too tired to argue. Liam came racing back down the stairs, his eyes wide with excitement. "Mommy, my room has space wallpaper, and there are new toys. Can I play before bed?" I glanced at my watch. Nearly 9, well past his usual bedtime. 10 minutes, then pajamas and teeth, I conceded, unable to resist his enthusiasm. As Liam dashed back upstairs, Dominic moved toward the door. "I should let you both get settled. We can talk more tomorrow." "Dominic," I called as he reached for the doorknob. What exactly did you tell him today? About us? About why he's never met you before? He turned back, his expression serious. The truth, mostly. That I didn't know about him until yesterday. That if I had, I would have been there from the beginning. A shadow crossed his face. I told him that meeting his mother was the most important night of my life, and finding him was the second. The sincerity in his voice made my chest tighten. And he accepted that? Just like that? Children are remarkably adaptable, Dominic replied. And Liam has clearly been waiting for his father to appear. Those stories you told him about the king searching for his queen created the perfect foundation. His gaze held mine. Thank you for that. For keeping me alive in his imagination. Even when you had every right to paint me as the villain, I looked away, uncomfortable with his gratitude. He needed something to believe in, and now he has something real, Dominic said softly. We all do. He opened the door, pausing on the threshold. Good night, Emma. Call if you need anything. Anything at all. After he left, I sank onto the plush sofa, my mind and body equally exhausted. The events of the past 2 days felt like a dream, or perhaps I was finally waking from a 5-year nightmare of struggle and fear. I opened the velvet box, revealing a sleek smartphone that probably cost more than my monthly rent. Despite my misgivings about accepting gifts from Dominic, the practical side of me couldn't deny the necessity of reliable communication, especially with my health so precarious. Setting it aside, I went upstairs to check on Liam. He had already fallen asleep among the new toys, his small face peaceful in a way I hadn't seen in months. The weight of our precarious existence had affected him more than I'd wanted to admit. I carried him to bed, tucking him under luxurious sheets that felt like clouds, as I brushed his dark curls from his forehead. Curls so like his father's, a tear slipped down my cheek. For 5 years we'd been alone, fighting to survive. Now, suddenly, we weren't alone anymore. The question was whether I could trust this new reality, and the man offering it to us. Morning came with golden sunlight streaming through windows framed by trees I hadn't noticed in the darkness. For a moment, I lay disoriented in the cloud-soft bed, before remembering where we were and why. The smell of coffee drew me downstairs, where I found Dominic in the kitchen, dressed casually in jeans and a Henley that did little to diminish his commanding presence. Liam sat at the counter, happily demolishing a stack of pancakes. Good morning, Dominic greeted me, offering a steaming mug. I hope you don't mind the intrusion. Liam was awake early, and I thought you could use the rest. I accepted the coffee wordlessly, still processing the domestic scene before me. How easily Dominic had inserted himself into our lives, how naturally Liam had accepted him. We made pancakes, Liam announced through a mouthful. Daddy knows how to flip them in the air. Daddy. The word still jolted me, but Dominic's expression, a mixture of pride and wonder, made it impossible to correct my son. I see that, I murmured, taking a sip of perfectly brewed coffee. Thank you for breakfast. My pleasure, Dominic replied, his eyes lingering on my face. How are you feeling today? Any side effects from the treatment? The genuine concern in his voice disarmed me. A little tired. Nothing serious yet. He nodded, relief evident in his expression. Dr. Keller mentioned the side effects might take a day or two to manifest. He hesitated, then continued more carefully. I've arranged for a private nurse to be available when you need her, and I'd like to formally invite you both to stay here, at least during your treatment cycle. The guest house is yours for as long as you want it. I set my mug down, choosing my words carefully with Liam listening. That's very generous, but we need to return to our apartment today. Our lives are there. Disappointment flashed across his face before he schooled his expression. Of course. Vince can drive you whenever you're ready. He turned to Liam. How about that movie we promised you before you go? Liam's face lit up. The space one? Any one you choose, Dominic agreed with a smile that transformed his normally serious face. 3 hours later, after a movie in Dominic's ridiculously opulent home theater and a tour of the grounds that included a playground built specifically for Liam overnight, a fact that both impressed and unnerved me, we were finally ready to leave. Dominic walked us to the waiting SUV, Liam's hand clasped in his. When will I see you again? Liam asked, his voice small and uncertain. Dominic knelt to his level, his expression solemn. Very soon. I promise. How about Saturday? I'll pick you up, and we can spend the day together. Can Mommy come too? Liam asked, glancing up at me. If she wants to, Dominic replied, his eyes meeting mine with a question in their depths. I nodded reluctantly. We'll both be there. Relief and satisfaction crossed his face as he stood. I'll call you tonight to check how you're feeling, he said, helping Liam into the car. And Emma? He hesitated, lowering his voice. Please consider my offer. The guest house is yours. No strings attached. You'd be more comfortable here during your treatment. The sincerity in his eyes made it difficult to maintain my defenses. I'll think about it, I conceded, allowing him to help me into the SUV beside Liam. As Vince drove us away, I watched Dominic's figure in the side mirror until the gates closed behind us, shutting away the fairy tale world he'd offered us. I like Daddy, Liam said quietly from beside me. He looks at you the way the king looks at the queen in my stories. Out of the mouths of babes, I squeezed his hand, unsure how to respond to his innocent observation. Our apartment building looked even shabbier after the luxury of Dominic's estate. The elevator was still broken, and the stairwell smelled of stale cigarettes as we climbed to the 4th floor. Inside, our tiny home felt colder than usual, the water stain on the ceiling somehow more prominent. Is this really our house? Liam asked, looking around with new eyes. It's so small. It's our home, I corrected gently, setting down the bags Dominic had insisted on filling with leftovers from Elena's kitchen. But as I moved through the familiar rooms, I saw them through Dominic's eyes. The peeling paint, the threadbare furniture, the draft from windows that never quite closed properly. We had survived here, but we had never thrived. That night, after tucking Liam into bed with promises that yes, he would see his father on Saturday, I sat alone in the dim light of our living room, turning Dominic's sleek phone between my fingers. When it rang, I wasn't surprised to see his name on the screen. How are you feeling? He asked without preamble when I answered. Tired, a little nauseous. Dr. Keller said that's normal. His voice softened with concern. Is there anything you need? Anything I can send over? We're fine, I assured him, though my gaze drifted to the ceiling where a new leak had started during our absence, a steady drip into a pot on the floor creating a rhythmic backdrop to our conversation. Emma, Dominic said after a moment of silence, I know this is happening fast. I know you have every reason to be cautious. But I meant what I said. You and Liam belong with me. I closed my eyes, fighting the pull of his words. You can't just claim us like lost property, Dominic. That's not what I'm doing, he insisted. I'm offering you both the life you deserve. The life I would have given you from the beginning if I'd known. And what about what I want? I challenged softly. Tell me what you want, he replied without hesitation. Whatever it is, if it's within my power to give, it's yours. The answer rose to my lips before I could suppress it. Time, I said honestly. Time to get to know you. Time to trust this isn't some fairy tale that will disappear in the morning. Time, he repeated thoughtfully. That, I can give you. But Emma... His voice dropped lower, more intimate. Don't waste too much of it. Your treatment will be difficult. Let me help you through it. 3 weeks later, I finally accepted his offer. After 7 brutal treatment sessions that left me vomiting and barely able to stand, after struggling up 4 flights of stairs on legs that threatened to buckle, after watching Liam's face grow increasingly worried each time he had to help his mother to bed, I called Dominic from the bathroom floor of our apartment. He arrived in 20 minutes, taking in my pale face and trembling hands without comment. Wordlessly, he lifted me from the cold tile, cradling me against his chest, as though I weighed nothing. Pack a bag for Liam, he instructed softly. You're coming home. Home. The word echoed in my mind as he carried me to the waiting car, as Vince loaded our hastily packed belongings, as we drove through the night to the estate that gleamed like a beacon on the hillside. 6 months passed in a blur of treatments, good days and bad, Liam's delighted exploration of his new world, and Dominic's steady, unwavering presence through it all. He never pushed, never demanded, simply remained, solid and constant as we built something that began to feel remarkably like a family. On a clear spring morning, Dr. Keller delivered the news we'd been waiting for. Complete remission, he announced, his smile wide as he showed us the scan results in Dominic's study. The experimental protocol worked better than we could have hoped. Dominic's hand found mine, squeezing so tightly it almost hurt. The emotion on his face, raw, unguarded joy, mirrored the feeling bursting in my own chest. That night, after Liam had been tucked into bed in his space-themed room that was now permanently his, Dominic and I walked in the gardens behind the main house. The air was cool, but sweet with the scent of early blooms. The sky above us scattered with stars. "I have something for you," he said, stopping beside a marble fountain that glittered in the moonlight. "Not a ring," he added quickly, seeing my expression. "Not yet, though I hope someday." He withdrew a small envelope from his pocket, offering it with uncharacteristic hesitation. Inside was a deed to a charming Victorian house in a quiet neighborhood near good schools. My name was listed as the owner. "I don't understand," I said, looking up at him in confusion. "It's yours," he explained, his dark eyes intent on mine. "Your independence, your security. Whether you choose to stay with me or not, you and Liam will always have a home that belongs to you alone." The gesture, so unexpected, so profound in its understanding of my deepest fears, broke something open inside me. This man, who could have simply taken what he wanted through force or manipulation, was instead offering me the freedom to choose. "Why?" I whispered, my voice catching. "Because I love you," he said simply. "Not just as Liam's mother, not just as the woman from that night 6 years ago. I love who you are now, your strength, your fierce protection of our son, your refusal to be bought or intimidated." His hand rose to cup my cheek. "I want you to choose me, Emma, not because you need me, but because you want me too." In that moment, looking into his eyes, I knew the truth I'd been fighting for months. "I do," I admitted softly. "God help me, I do want you." His kiss was gentle at first, a question rather than a demand. When I responded, wrapping my arms around his neck to pull him closer, it deepened into something that echoed that first night years ago. Passion tempered now by something deeper, something built on shared struggle and mutual respect. "Stay," he murmured against my lips. "Not in the guest house, not as my guest. Stay with me, as my partner, my equal." I drew back slightly to study his face in the moonlight. "Are you sure? Your world is so different from mine. Your business, your connections, are separate from our life together," he assured me. "I've spent the last decade legitimizing Romano Enterprises. Whatever shadows remain from my family's past, they will never touch you or Liam." His expression grew fierce with conviction. "I will always protect you both. Always." I believed him. Despite everything, despite the rational voice warning me of the dangers of his world, I believed him. "Yes," I said finally. "We'll stay, as your family." His smile, brilliant and unguarded, was my answer. Whatever the future held, whatever challenges we faced, we would face them together. The king had found his queen, and the story was only beginning. 1 year later, I stood in the garden of the estate, our home now in every sense, watching as Dominic taught Liam to throw a baseball across the perfectly manicured lawn. My hair had grown back, curling past my shoulders in the warm spring breeze. My body had recovered its strength, along with a few new curves that Dominic's appreciative gaze never failed to notice. The diamond ring on my finger caught the sunlight as I rested my hand on the slight swell of my stomach. Soon, Liam would have a sister, a princess to complete our unlikely fairy tale. "Mommy, watch!" Liam called, his face bright with excitement as he caught Dominic's gentle throw. "Daddy says I'm a natural." "You definitely are," I agreed, smiling as Dominic winked at me over our son's head. Later, as dusk settled over the estate and Liam slept peacefully upstairs, Dominic and I sat on the terrace overlooking the city lights below, his arm wrapped around me, drawing me against his solid warmth. "Happy?" he murmured, his lips brushing my temple. "Complete," I corrected, turning to meet his gaze. "For the first time in my life, I feel complete." His eyes, no longer sad, no longer haunted, shone with a contentment that matched my own. I told you once that finding you again was like finding a missing piece of myself, he said softly. I never imagined how true that would prove to be. As his lips found mine in the gathering darkness, I silently thanked the fates that had brought us together twice, once in a summer night of passion, and again through the innocent words of a little boy who recognized the king from his mother's stories. Our story wasn't perfect, it wasn't always easy, but it was ours, real and solid and lasting, and in the end, isn't that what every fairy tale hopes to become?